Hey you guys, so today we're going to talk to you about um, the difference between the First and Second Continental Congresses. That's going to be the first part of the video. Then we're going to talk about the difference between the Loyalists, which are people like this. So you can tell by the red coat that these are people who were loyal to the crown. And then the Patriots. These are the people that were fighting for independence and our rights, and they were tired of all the policies being put on by Great Britain, and you can tell by their blue uniforms that they are part of the continental side. So when you are trying to identify the differences between the Great British, notice the red coat, and the colonists, the blue coat, or the ones that look like farmers would also be the colonists. So with that being said, let's get clicking chickens and learn about the First and Second Continental Congresses. Here we go. Before we dive into the Loyalist activity, let's cover a little bit of information about the First and Second Continental Congresses, which people seem a bit confused about. The First Continental Congress, this was when we had a group of leaders from each colony who came to Philadelphia to represent their colony. This was the first time that this ever happened. Before then, they were kind of acting like separate countries, so now we were almost one. They did not at this point in time really seek independence from Great Britain. They were trying to work through things in a peaceful way. They decided to respond to all British actions by boycotting British products. And then what they did is they also sent what was called the Declaration of Rights. This is separate than the Declaration of Independence, asking the king and the parliament to recognize their rights as English citizens and ask the king to change the policies that were happening towards the colonies. They thought their policies that were being forced on them were unfair. And then, of course, if all these things didn't happen, they would meet again to try to discuss and work things out with the king. Now, on to the Second Continental Congress and what their actions were. So what was the Second Continental Congress and how was it different than the first? Well, Second Continental Congress, King George refused to address any of the concerns in the Declaration of Rights. Now remember, the Declaration of Rights is different than the Declaration of Independence. At this point in time, we were not united as to what to do with our problems with Great Britain. A lot of people looked at things differently. I mean, Massachusetts had a lot of issues because there was a lot of British there and they were having a lot of problems, while Virginia, not so much. So they were very much having different opinions as to what to do. We did form the First Continental Army, and that was led by the great George Washington. And then as Washington prepared for war, guess what Congress did? Kept that screen up and made it look like we were pursuing peace. So that was one of the things that the Second Continental Congress had done. So some of the other things the Second Continental Congress did is they signed what was called the Olive Branch Petition. Now there's an old saying that I'm extending you an olive branch. That's like a sign of peace, a sign of compromise. And this was a final attempt to really try to make peace with Great Britain. Here's the thing, King George refused to even read it. So by being ignored by the king, and the continuing fights that were happening between the colonists and the British and the rising tension, the Declaration of Independence was written. And it was in 1776 that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Now remember, the Declaration was really like a breakup letter with our boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, we were done. We were saying, here's all the reasons why we're finished. Here's what we are. We have these rights, and our rights come from God. They are natural and they cannot be taken away. Well, as you can imagine, this declaration really upset King George. And what these signers really did in the end was a lot of them signed their death warrants. And we're going to have more information about that coming up soon. So that's the differences between the First and Second Continental Congresses. Let's now talk about Loyalists so you can do your activity. So you guys, today we're going to talk about the Loyalists, because as our founding fathers were fighting for independence, they still had to overcome people that were still loyal to the crown. Now here we are, it's around 1775, and the movement towards independence is actually now starting to gain some traction. We had our first Continental Congress is when finally all these 13 colonies that you can see behind me on this map, they are no longer like operating as like individual countries, because initially that's what they were. But now they've actually come together where they all have delegates from each of their different states, and they all have a voice. So now all these 13 colonies are starting to come together and fight together as one, which, as you know, when you are working with numbers or working with a lot of people, there's safety in numbers, right? And that same premise kind of holds true with the 13 colonies. They are no longer operating as one, where their powers may be a little bit weak, but together they are united and much stronger.